perception, because it often comes down to how you perceive things that then leads to anxiety. Because if you're stuck in the hamster wheel of always thinking that what you're seeing is bigger than what it is, and you're creating those stories in your mind, whereas if we can learn to just calm the busy mind and just dive deep into our heart knows the way. Our heart is our compass, and aligning with yourself, with your values.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Teen Rockstar Entrepreneur Podcast. We're super excited to be here. Today, I have Sabrina Del Luca with me. She is a mindset expert, and I'm really excited to have this conversation today. How are you doing, Sabrina?
I'm doing great, Naomi. Thank you so much for this invitation, for having me on your show. I'm excited as well.
So I know that mindset, like I wrote in the title, can cause or eliminate anxiety or depression. Right. So I guess introduce yourself, say a little bit about what you do, and then we'll get into the whole topic of mindset and how it affects our life.
Perfect. Well, thank you. So I am a mindset coach. I do have a background in corporate as well as dance. So I kind of lived a few different lives up until this point. That's brought me to where I am. I think everything that I've learned along the way has really contributed to what I'm able to do now and how I give back. For me, it all started with understanding my own mindset and how I was standing in my own way, how I was self-sabotaging, how I was just keeping myself in a place where I felt stuck in my corporate life. And when I finally realized that and made the decision to leave, I then began this immense healing journey, discovered the power of mindset, discovered the power of following your heart, and ended up landing a dance teaching job with a high school. So working with high school kids on a regular basis and teens. And I did teach teens in the past more in like a studio dance concept. But I feel like working at the high school, I'm able to have a different relationship with them. I'm able to really have a deeper relationship because I'm there more often. And we're together over their high school journey. So we're together for a few years. And that's where I really realized, like, I want to help these kids and I want to help everyone to feel more confident, to just understand the power that they have over their own perception, because it often comes down to how you perceive things that then leads to anxiety. Because if you're stuck in the hamster wheel of always thinking that what you're seeing is bigger than what it is, and you're creating those stories in your mind, whereas if we can learn to just calm the busy mind and just dive deep into our heart knows the way. Our heart is our compass, and aligning with yourself, with your values. And this is speaking from someone who did that work, because I was the overthinker, the analyzer, the planner. I was the person caught up with telling all those stories or being stuck in my old stories. And how I showed up in the world was based on all of that preconceived notion, all of that conditioning. So I needed to do the work for myself first to understand that, hey, this is not helping me. This is not serving me. I'm stuck in my old habits because I'm not able to open my mind and just be curious to see how I can approach this differently. So through that work, I do that for everybody now.
I love what you're saying, and the fact that you are working with teens and what you're talking about mindset. When you think of the fact that we have like 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, and we're not even becoming aware of what these thoughts are and where we got these thoughts. And that's what young people don't understand. And I didn't understand this myself, like you. I had to go through a healing journey, and I had to learn how to reset and develop a different mindset, because I was caught up in the same pattern that you were, being overcritical and not really being aware of what these thoughts were, and understanding that a lot of these thoughts are created by our perception of the world.
Exactly.
And we think that this is a reality, but it's not really the reality. It's our reality that we've created by what we've got going on in our head. And we don't realize that a lot of times we develop this really critical voice inside in our heads, and we're really hard on ourselves. And this is where self-sabotage comes in too. And this is why it's so important to teach this to young minds, because we think that because these thoughts are in our head, they're our own. But a lot of the times, these thoughts that we have, they're not ours. So if you were raised in a childhood environment where you were criticized a lot, or maybe you were in a school environment where you were bullied a lot, these thoughts end up seeping into what is your identity. And now you think that these I can't thoughts, or this I'm a loser, or these feelings that you feel a certain way about yourself stem because of you, and they don't. They're actually filtered in thoughts that you've accepted as your own. It gets really complicated for teens. So how is it that you basically became aware and helped yourself in this journey?
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll get into what it is that you do with youth today.
Yes. Well, you described it perfectly, Naomi. It's really those thoughts that have been created by your experiences, by your perception. It often begins in childhood, because that's where you were met with this limiting belief, where you wanted to do something and someone or something happened where they told you, I can't do it. Or there's a moment where you failed at something and you became embarrassed and guilty and you felt shame. And then from then on, your story in your mind is, I can never do that. So example, public speaking, which is a big fear for a lot of people. If as a kid, you went on stage and you got stage fright and you couldn't speak, then you're creating a reality in your mind of, I am not a public speaker. I can never speak in public. And that's something that you carry with you. So let's say you grow up and you're now in corporate and you have to do a presentation. If you do not get rid of that limiting belief and rewrite your story, then you're always going to think that you're not a public speaker, but you've never actually done the work to help yourself to discover, okay, let me try, let me be curious. So it all starts with identifying what is that thought or that story that you created so long ago that is still holding you back today. We call those limiting beliefs, or we call those, old, outdated stories. And empower yourself to realize that you can choose to change that story. You can actually change the thought that you had of, I can't do this. I can't public speak, therefore I am not a public speaker, becomes your identity. And I will never be able to speak in front of a crowd. But if your job calls for it, or if you want to be able to, have that skill, there is the possibility of working on it, of using the mindset shift, reframing, rewriting your story and saying, I am somebody who is able to speak in public. I am somebody who is able to be curious about what my skills are, and you change that story.
We were on the conversation talking about our perceptions, and you were giving a really good example when you were talking about something simple like public speaking. And let's say that you try to do public speaking and you fail, you do really bad, and then all of a sudden, and this happens to all of us, it's not just to teens, this is how we go forming our perceptions. And so now we think, oh my God, I suck at this, I'm terrible, or we made a mistake and they laughed, and that's what stays in our memory. So continue what you were saying about this, because this is really interesting and important.
Yes. And it's often the feelings of embarrassment that will stop us, right? Or like you said, I did something and they laughed. And then because you feel embarrassed, you're never going to do it again. As a teen, even, I'm a dancer. So I went through my teen years dancing. And there were times where, I was laughed at because kids are mean and kids are kids. Yeah. I was able to really connect with my why of like, I love dance and I'm going to keep doing it. But I know so many of my friends and so many dancers or people who try to do something in front of others, and they're met with this misunderstanding and they're laughed at. And then they perceive that as an attack on them, a personal attack, that I'm not good at this, so I'm never going to do it again. And that grows up with you. It evolves with you. Yes. So then when you're aware of how you hold yourself back and what are those thoughts and those stories that you have, which again are conditioning because you've believed it for so long, then you need to start unpacking that. You need to start breaking down those beliefs, peeling back the layers and getting to the core of, okay, in that moment that I was on stage and I failed and people laughed at me, does it mean that I'm not capable, that I'm not a good person, or that I'm not able to learn anything? No. Like, what was the truth? The truth is, in that moment, I failed, but the truth is not, I'm not ever able to do that again. So it's being able to decipher what it is that held you back. It was the feeling of embarrassment, most likely. And then saying, okay, but that was then. How can I now, if it is something that I want to pursue, I do want to public speak, I need to do a presentation. How can I start working on those skills? And how can I start changing my mindset to believe that I am capable? Because the most common thoughts that hold us back are, I'm not good enough, I'm not capable, I can't do it.
Mhm. I can't. It's such a
I
big one.
can't. The I can't. Oh my God, I
The I
hate
can't
the I
syndrome.
can't. Yeah.
Yes. And this is the thing, that we also live in a society where they penalize mistakes. So you're in school, you make mistakes on your test, you fail. So you
Yeah.
do this, you fail, and everyone looks at you. So we're raised kind of in a society where we're penalized for failing, but we know as adults that life does not work that way,
No.
because it's actually through failing that you learn and you develop that process and you develop that resilience, that attitude of, you know what? Yeah, I really sucked at that. I'm going to have to practice more, instead of thinking, I suck. This is what I tell youth and I tell parents. We need to separate ourselves, like, from creating that identity. So
Yes.
you can suck at something, but it doesn't mean that you suck. It's
Right.
two really big different things. And then also, just because you suck, we all suck till we're good. You think we were born being
Yeah.
an expert at something? No, no, it's through trial and error. I always say this. Oh my God, I can't remember his name. Is it Einstein? How many tries did he take? It took over 1,000 tries for him to develop the light bulb.
There we go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And how many of us actually can say that we've done something 1,000 times? I think if you did something 1,000 times, maybe you could say you suck. But even then, you see how it's
Yeah.
not true.
Exactly. And even think back to us as babies. We're learning to walk. As we're learning to walk, how many times do we fall? But as parents, do you tell that child, you suck, get back up?
You're never going to walk. Forget it. Just
Forget
crawl.
it. Just never mind. Just crawl for the
Crawl.
rest of your life.
Yeah.
Exactly. So when did that shift? When did that change? Right. And I agree with you that we are in a society where failure is penalized and failure is bad. But I feel like it needs to start there, that we need to look at failure differently. We need to look at failure as an opportunity to grow and to learn, and not a reason to give up, a reason to stop trying. So think of you crawling. If the parent was like, well, you're never going to do this, so never mind, as a child, you're going to feel that. And you're going to also have the tendency to give up and not try and stop trying. So, parents, you have a very important role to play, because you need to be encouraging your children to keep trying, to keep going for it. Recognize the failure if it does come about and say, okay, not you're grounded because you failed, which
Yeah.
is usually the case. And I get it. Like, parents, you need to show some kind of consequence. I get it. Show the consequence, but also, okay, now what can we learn from this? How are you going to do better next time? How can I support you to help you to do better so that you don't fail again?
Exactly. And also the context of everything. So, like, you failed. Okay, if I'm going to ground you because you failed, it's going to make you feel stupid. So,
Yeah.
why did you fail? Ground them maybe because they didn't study. They didn't apply themselves, you know?
Right.
I also think that the wording sometimes is really important, because, and this is a people thing. We tend to do this. We tend to focus on criticism. We tend to focus and see the negative more than the
Right.
positive, and we
Right.
tend to talk about it more. So when someone does makes a mistake or does something, we approach them, which is the natural thing to do. But what
Mm.
happens is, when we're children, and all we're getting approached for is, you made this mistake, you made this mistake, but there's not an equal amount of encouragement and also pointing out good aspects, then we tend to fall into that I can't, or that little bit of unworthiness. And I think
Mm,
that's also something that we as individuals have to pay attention to. I even try in my relationships when I'm going to approach a conversation to always start saying something positive or
right.
saying something that I appreciate about that person before going into that conversation, because as human beings, it puts our guard down. We don't feel like we're being attacked or we don't feel like we're being criticized. So I feel like that's something really
Yeah.
important for parents too. So,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
personally for you, how did you start changing your mindset? What were things that you noticed? Because I think you mentioned self-sabotage, and that's
Yes.
something that so many of us do. I did it for so many years of my life, and we think that it's the world not letting us do what we want, and we don't realize that it's little things that we're doing that is stopping us
Right.
from getting what we want or doing things that we want. So how did you start tweaking
Oof.
those
Tweaking.
patterns?
It's a good
Because
word.
yeah, it is. It's tweaking.
Yeah, because it doesn't happen overnight. It happens
Uh,
over time. For me, I am a recovering people pleaser because it's a work in progress. I need to make sure everyone's happy, everyone's taken care of. I think that also was demonstrated in my previous job at an advertising agency where I was the client relationship director, meaning I had to make sure the clients were happy, the agency creative team was happy. I had to find solutions for everybody.
right.
So I was the one that was in the middle. I was the mediator, let's call it that, which is a very difficult role to play because you're constantly trying to please other people. And I lost myself in that process. I forgot for myself to set boundaries, to really be clear with the energy that I was giving, which then led to a burnout, which then began my healing journey. So, in the healing journey, I had to recognize the parts of myself that I was self sabotaging or that were self sabotaging areas, like the people pleasing, but even bigger, the perfectionist, the
Yeah.
person who needed to have everything under control, needed to be perfect. And I noticed in the healing journey, I then did discover that I wanted to give back more. I wanted to help people more. I wanted to leave corporate and start something on my own, get more into teaching because the instant gratification that I received from the students, seeing their confidence, seeing their accomplishments as I was teaching them dance, I was like, this is what I want to lean into more. And then through that, I naturally found coaching. But to be a coach, I had to do the coaching for myself. I had to have a coach let me know and do the work. And building my business, the perfectionist tendencies started happening. And I found myself procrastinating, but procrastinating in the sense of, okay, well, when I get the certification, then I'll launch my business. When this is perfect, then I'll launch my business. Like when this happens, and even what for me was the aha moment of, oh my God, this is self sabotaging, procrastinating in terms of actually going through with launching. I was doing the work behind the scenes. I was planning, I was organizing. So you feel like you're still moving forward.
Which is not.
That's the key, right? Like you feel like, oh, well, I'm being productive because I'm still doing a little bit of work of planning, but there's only so much planning you can do. At one point, you got to launch it. You got to go for it, right?
Exactly, exactly. So I think the reason why we do this a lot is fear.
Oh, for sure. Because
It's
once it's out there, it's like, oh, okay, this is happening. So the fear
exactly,
holds you back. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So how were you able to start overcoming that fear
I
and
had
that
help.
self-doubt?
Yeah, I had help. This is where I truly believe in coaching and guidance to because there's only so much we can do. And we need that support. We need that person or people around you to say, hey, wait a second, did you see it this way? Because again, when I'm stuck in my perfectionist tendencies and my self sabotaging tendencies, I still feel because I'm doing the planning work that I'm moving forward. So I don't see there's a problem. I don't recognize that I'm holding myself back. I'm just saying, "Oh, I'm not ready to launch yet." But I needed someone on the outside to let me know, "Hey, you need to just go and do it. You need to just let go of that fear. Not even let go. You need to lean into the fear because it's going to be scary. It's going to, either way, it's going to be scary. But what is it that is truly your desire in terms of what is your why? And I say this to my clients, I say this to the kids too when they're dancing. Like, what is your why? Why are you doing this? Because if you can remind yourself of the bigger picture of the end goal, then you understand that what you're feeling is valid. it's justified, but also, okay, this is what I need to feel to be able to move through. And understanding that what's on the other side is scary because it's unfamiliar, not because you're
Exactly.
not capable, not because you can't do it. You have to try to be able to know what it is that you can do.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that I've realized that most of the time, the fear that I had was so much bigger than the actual challenge that I was facing. And then when I actually confronted my fear and faced the challenge, I don't think there's one time that I've ever looked back and thought, my God, I can't believe it took me so long to do this. I held myself back. And actually, my fear was the boogeyman. The
Yeah,
challenge wasn't that bad.
absolutely. Yeah.
It's
Like,
incredible. That's
yeah.
something that I try to tell young people. The boogeyman is the fear that is
Yes.
keeping you from everything that you want. Once you
Yes.
jump that, it's not that hard. And it's something that I try to tell parents too, because our natural instinct is, as human beings, we, of course, our brain is geared for survival.
Right.
So, it's fear and love. So it'll run to something when it feels safe, and it'll run away from something that it feels threatening. So our tendency is to run away. And I see that a lot of kids, they start quitting things, like they get into some sports, and they notice that maybe their friend, it's much easier for them to apply the skill
Mm,
or something. And so what do they feel? Oh, I'm not good. Or
right.
because again, we're comparing creatures, we can't help it. We can't help to compare ourselves. And this is a good thing, guys. The reason why we compare ourselves is because of hierarchy. So how are you going to know your place in something, or how are you going to know that you're doing better or that you need to improve, if you don't see the progress in yourself and in others? So we shouldn't look at these comparisons as something negative. We should look at it as, oh, okay, so he's doing that. He's better. Well, maybe this is easier for him. Maybe I need to practice a little more.
Yeah.
How did you handle that?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting in terms of comparison of how can we use it to see potential, right?
Exactly.
How can we use it to see what is possible? But also being able to say, I am not like that person. That person accomplished what they did. They have a completely different background, completely different circumstances. It's recognizing that we are all unique and we will all get to where we need to get to on our own terms. But I think the interesting point of comparison where we can use it in a positive way is actually seeing the potential or the opportunity, but not letting it hold us back. So let's say someone, even me as a coach, like there's so many coaches out there and I
Exactly.
look up to so many of them. But if I see that a coach is doing something amazing that I want to do, I need to look at it as, oh, it's possible. And remember that there's room for everybody instead of, oh, they're doing it, so I can't. That role, that place has been taken, that seat at the table has been taken. I
Exactly.
cannot sit. Right. And
Exactly.
for kids too, like especially for teens, I see the comparison. Oh, the comparison is real. But how can you learn to also trust yourself to know that you are an individual and you are on your own journey and you have so many gifts and talents to contribute, to not let the basketball superstar bring you down because you are also talented. You are also able to do what you want to do and not have to always be compared to somebody else, meaning that if they're doing it, you can't.
Absolutely. And understand the process. Before you give up on something, make sure that you've really tried. And also what you said, when you understand your why, like, because a
Mm,
lot of times I realize, like, when I try to do something, why am I trying to do it? Am I doing it
mm,
because all my friends are doing it? Am I doing it because I had a podcast interview where everyone in the family was a doctor? So they felt pressure for years of having to
yeah.
be a doctor, having to be a doctor, but that wasn't their thing. And it was that disappointment of not follow the family tradition or all of this, realizing that we all have a purpose. And that's what I wanted to get to, because it's what you said, asking
Yeah.
the why.
Yeah.
I think the why of why you're doing something is really important, because when you figure out your why, your how suddenly appears.
Yes,
That's
it does.
that's the interesting part.
It
Absolutely.
does.
So
And also being curious to see how are the different ways you can get to your goal, because there's not just one path. Just because so and so did it this way doesn't mean you also have to do it that way. You can do it in your own way, but being fueled or taking an inspired action that aligns with you.
exactly. So talk to me a little bit about your dance class and your students. I know that you said that you also work sometimes with students that are in a regular class and not in
Right.
the dance class.
Right.
And yeah, so I wanted you to talk a little bit about the differences that you see because, you know, nowadays I see that a lot of young people, especially since 2020, we had all those problems when COVID came and schools closing down and us having
Right.
to isolate ourselves, that youth struggled. They were already struggling a little bit, and our teenage years are so hard. It really hit them really hard. What would you say in reference to the fact of when you have a purpose, when you have a why, you notice that it makes it so much easier for, well, for all of us, but in particular, we're talking about teenagers, how it makes their life so much easier.
Yeah. If I take the example of just being in high school and having a class, so you're in a math class versus you're in a dance class. For some, math is stimulating. Math is amazing. And they're going to be in that class. They're going to be listening. They're going to be participating and they're going to love it. And for others, they're bored out of their mind. And then because they're bored, then they're causing a ruckus or they have so much energy. And I think that's the reality too. Teens,
Yeah.
and what I've noticed over the past 5, 6 years that I've been working with them in high school is that they have a lot of energy that they don't know how to use or what to do with. And in the beginning, I'm like, why are you always chasing each other? Why are you always wrestling in class? Like, what is this behavior? But then I
Exactly.
learned that it's their energy and they don't know how to use it. So I think activities that allow them to move, the sports, the dance gives them an outlet to use that energy. And also, if you're aligned with like the girls in my dance class, they come to class and they have a purpose. I'm here to dance and that's what I want to do. Then they're more likely to be focused, to be participating, to be really happy to be where they are. Because if you don't want to be where you are, then it's normal that you're going to start acting up because you're bored and you're unhappy, you're uncomfortable, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know that that is a big problem of what happens in school today. I mean, you were a teen, I was a teen.
Yeah,
During our teenage years, our brain is developing completely different than an adult brain is fully developed. There's certain things that we need. And, you know, this one size fits all school system doesn't work for everybody.
I
And
agree.
and what I see is usually the students that act out a little bit more, they're the one, they have a lot to offer. It's
They
just different.
do.
They have a lot to offer.
Yeah.
It's just different from what the other students. And you know, like you said, you might not be into math, you might not be into English, you might not be into science. Maybe your brain is a little bit more creative. Maybe
Yeah.
you're more into entrepreneurship. Maybe you're more into sports. Maybe you're more into nutrition. And a lot of this stuff doesn't get touched up on very much in school. And so it leaves us in a narrow, like, I don't know, like in a narrow bubble where we feel like
Mm,
there's something wrong with us because we're not adapting and we're the ones that aren't following like the
yeah.
rules. And
And you know, those kids actually, those are the kids who get punished for acting out. And so then the message that they're receiving is there's something wrong with me, like you're saying, because I am not fitting into this mold. But don't we want our kids to be their own unique self? Like, we don't want people, I don't want anyone to fit into a mold. I want to encourage them to be themselves as authentic as possible. But there's no place right now for that in the current system.
I know, and this is one thing that I tell parents because not every parent can homeschool or not
Right.
every parent could put their child in a private school or charter school or something like that. And so they're stuck, you know, with this system. But you as a parent can be aware, and I hate the labels that they put on children today. So if your child is a little bit more active than others, and I said this before, don't let anyone label your child. Okay, your child is not a troubled child. Your child is not a misbehaving child. Your child is a child who is not being interested. His interests aren't being sparked in this environment because that's all it is. And this is how we learn.
Yeah.
If you speak to experts like Jim Quick, who's an expert in mindset, He'll tell you that the way the brain remembers something, it's if you have a personal interest or if the topic is related to you. Now, think of school. How many topics are related to you and
Mm.
specifically designed to question or to talk about you or your self-awareness? It doesn't happen.
No, it
So a lot
doesn't.
of kids, yeah, a lot of kids
Mm.
fall through that line. So I think it's really important for parents and for even teens to keep this in mind. If you're
Mhm.
feeling like this, believe me, there is something out there for you. What you need to do is you need to research. Now you need to develop that sense of curiosity and
Right.
figure out what it is that you like.
Absolutely. I totally agree. You know, here where I am in Montreal in Canada, we have programs in school where it's kind of like an integrated program at the high school itself. In the mornings, they'll have their regular high school topics like math and science and geography and all that. In the afternoons, they have a specialized program. And that specialized program you apply to, and it could be sports related, it could be hockey, it could be basketball, or it could be where I teach dance and arts and music and drama. So that kind of structure already, I feel like we're stepping into the right direction and we're moving forward to allow the kids to choose the interest of their activity to hopefully stimulate them while they're at school. So it's not just about, okay, you come to school and then after school you do what you like. It's how can we integrate it into the curriculum to
Yeah.
make sure that you are being stimulated in what your interests are, like you were saying, Naomi. And there's also an important thing to note that in those programs, they have to keep up their academics. So it's not like they can disregard the morning stuff and only focus on the afternoon things. They need to have a balance. So you're also teaching the kids that there is a balance to be made. Like, yes, if you're more artistic, you're more athletic, you want to go towards that, but also don't forget that there is schoolwork to do and there is some things that you can learn. And even if you're not going to become a scientist, there are some theories, some practices, the way that you're learning in those kind of courses that can still benefit you in the long run. Like, of course, things like physics, you'll see it in everyday life, and there might be certain things that like I'll remember, oh yeah, I did learn this and now it makes sense as I'm applying in real life. And there are other things like, unless you're going to become an engineer, that you won't use that you learned in school, but at the same time it helps your brain to develop and to also learn how to learn, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. I think learning how to learn should be a class in itself.
Oh yeah, it should
It
actually.
should be a class in itself because to be a successful human being, you have to always keep learning. And the way that they're again teaching us in this system is like, oh, after you're out of school, that's it, I'm done. And
Exactly.
it's like, no, life is a learning experience. You should always be learning. You should be learning till your last breath.
Agreed. Yes.
And so I have to say that I really like that system in the American school system. Like I said, I'm talking about the public school system. They took
Right.
out those, what we used to call electives. We don't have physical fitness anymore. We don't do exercise in school anymore, which I find a huge shame because we need that. I mean, young adults, we need to exercise as human beings, physical
Oh yeah.
fitness. You know, the brain was made for movement, for motor function is one of our primary functions. So our brain works better when we're active. And we're learning to live such a sedentary lifestyle that this is why we are a little bit nulled, I would say. And it stems from
Yeah.
this. We're meant to be active. We're meant to spend most of our time outdoors, walking around, than sitting down in a box, staring at a box, talking on a box, eating from a box,
Yeah.
eating from a box,
Too
driving
many
in a
boxes.
box, too
Yeah.
many boxes. Too many boxes. We were not made for so many boxes. So
No.
that's one thing that I would tell teens and parents. Try to find activity in your life. I
Yeah.
know that our school system does not teach that anymore, but if
Yeah.
you can find a way to include some physical fitness, some activity,
Yeah.
you're going to start seeing that your body feels better and you're going to have a much clearer mind and you're going to be able to focus much more. I think a lot of what our youth has is just this pent up emotion, all this
Yeah.
energy and all these thoughts that they don't know what to do with. And this is
Mhm.
what's creating problems and havoc in their lives. And if we're able to release that, then we're able to move forward much, much faster. So
Oh,
the, the,
yeah.
the last question I wanted to ask you was the differences that you see, and I know we talked about it a little bit, about the purpose again, and the differences that you see in the students who kind of don't have an aim or a purpose, they're just going to class, and the ones with dance, so that the parents and the youth can understand the benefits of finding something that you love. Because we all have something we're good at, we all have a
Mhm.
purpose in life, something that we're meant to do, and it's ours. It's not anybody else's, it's not what our family wants, not our
Exactly.
friends, not society. It's ours.
Yeah, it
No?
is.
What would you say in reference to that and the differences you see and how important it is
Mm.
for young adults to find that why?
The main difference that I see would be in reference to recognizing the value in doing what you do when you have a purpose versus not. So if I look at the kids in the class, the ones who are focused, who see that there's value in their class because they have a clear vision of, okay, I'm in the dance program, I have a hockey tournament to prepare for, I have an art exhibit to do, like no matter what it is, they see value in going to class, in doing what they're doing because there's an end goal, versus the
Yeah.
kids who don't have a purpose, who they don't have direction. It
Yeah.
really just means that they're lost.
Yeah.
And as parents, as adults, as teachers, I think it's important that we help them, to guide them to find something that gives them a clear direction. Because like you were saying earlier, it's not that you're troubled, you don't label, it's just that you don't have a direction. And
Yeah.
let us help you find that direction. Let us help you what stimulates you. If it's not school, that's okay. But you got to do school, you got to go through it, but what can you do on the side or after school to give you that purpose, to know that, okay, I have to get through school, but after school I have this activity that I could look forward to. On weekends I have this activity that I could look forward to. So at least it gives you a direction, and aim, a purpose. I think that value piece is important, because if there's no value, you're not going to do it, you're not going to take it seriously, you're not going to focus, you're going to disregard it, and then you're going to be lost.
Yeah. And I love that you said that. And when you say value, it adds value to you.
Oh yeah.
You feel valuable. And I feel like that's the most important thing as human beings, and especially when we're young, finding our value and finding our place in this world. Like,
Yes.
where do I belong? Where do I fit in? And I think that that's the biggest thing, because when we're young, as human beings, belonging is one of our six basic human needs. We need
Right.
to belong. We're social creatures. That's what we were
Yes.
made for. And a lot of times when we're trying to find our place in this world, we can't find it because we haven't found
Yeah.
our value. We haven't found our why. And when you find that, like you said, your life just finally, it has direction, because if not,
Mhm.
you feel lost. And this is what we see. This is not only a teen thing. This is why I got into coaching and personal development myself, because I
Same.
didn't have a why, and I was doing a whole bunch of things, and I would jump from thing to, and they were great things. I
Yeah.
was even making so much money, but I didn't have a why, and I didn't understand what was missing.
Yeah.
You know,
Totally.
and when you don't find the reason or the motivation of why you're doing, and why you fit into this, and why this is what you should do, you just jump from thing to thing. And this is what we see in a lot of adults today. What I feel like the midlife crisis has a lot to do with a lot of these things,
Yes.
because we feel lost. We realize we get to a
Yeah.
point in our 40s that we're like, why am I even doing this? Like, I
Yeah.
don't even like this. Like, why am I even
Right.
doing it? And then we have to start over. And this is why I love working
Hmm.
with young adults, because it's like you have your whole life ahead of you. If you figure this out now, oh my God, you're golden. Like, I wish I could
Yeah.
go back to my teens and know what
Yeah.
I know now. It would be like, pew.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's true. And also, for me too, I had to question my why later on. And what I also want to bring to light is that it's okay to ask yourself questions, right? If you come to a point where you're saying, I'm no longer fulfilled where I am, it's good to feel that. It's good to know that you are meant for more. And then it's a matter of figuring out what it is that does fulfill me, instead of, like you're saying,